afternoon. My name is Olivia Kingree. I'm a marketing assistant at the Division of Continuing Studies at Rutgers. On behalf of the Rutgers University Online Learning Conference, I'm delighted to introduce Anne Michelle Marsden from the Rutgers University School of Management and Labor Relations. We are pleased to have her present diversity, equity, and inclusion in the virtual classroom. During the presentation, please use live Q&A to ask any questions of the presenter. At the end of each presentation today, there'll be a short survey displayed, and any feedback that you can provide is greatly appreciated. Enjoy.
Hi there. There we go. And you'll put up my PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Welcome. And what I'd like to do, which I do with my students all the time, I'm going to do with you to start off. And that is, I'm going to give you a poll. So there are 4 different poll questions. If my technician could open up the first poll question and help the people who are here today know how to take that poll. And I have 4 questions, and they'll take you a very short time to answer the questions. Technician, is the poll coming up? Oh, okay, wonderful. As soon as we give about 20 seconds for the first one, then we'll go ahead and we'll look at the second, third, and fourth. Some of them are very short. The one with challenges is the longest, and I'd like you to keep that open the longest time. Thank you. Okay. Thank you very much.
So I don't think I can like put this in the media tab, but I can share my screen.
Well, what I can do is I can put my PowerPoint over this entire thing when I'm talking, and then when I'm not giving information, I can pull it away, because to put it in your little box, nobody's going to be able to read what I've written. Okay, so that's the workaround we'll do. Okay, we ready for the third poll, or are they still taking the second poll? Okay, let's wait a moment. Sounds good. Thank you for your assistance. Yeah, this one's about learning goals. Now, how are we going to share the results here? Can they get shown in a box or anything? Okay. Okay, and then we should be able to do that last poll soon. Okay. All right. I've been looking forward to this for a long time. Just tell me when we've got the amount of results. What is our amount of people that are in the room? Okay. Okay. All right. We good to go? Okay, thank you. I can have these fed to us when I call on them, if you don't mind. But let's see what people said. Let's do the polls first then. Okay, can everybody do that? All right. Okay, so most people have not taught courses having to do with diversity, equity, and inclusion. Okay. Oh, 20% other issue. And then, all right. Okay. That helps me understand who's in the class right now, and it also gets you centered on some of the issues that I'm going to talk about. Now, I'm going to refer back to these poll questions, but for right now, I'm going to cover me, and you're going to see some of my presentation. All right, and my address and phone number are right down here if you have any desire to contact me in the future. We've just done the poll questions, and here's what I'm going to work with today. I've got 3 different parts. The first part is a basic presentation of different ideas that I use in 2 different kinds of courses. One course that doesn't have a focus on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and then another type of course that has a specific learning goals having to do with diversity, equity, and inclusion. The second part is about opportunities and challenges involving DEI, which is what I'm going to refer to it in the future, content and activities. That's all of the wonderful things that can happen, and I have some samples, and it's also what can really challenge us. And then the last part, I just want to engage with you. I wish that you had audio, but I guess you can ask questions and I can talk, or there's a side chat room if you want to chat. But all of what I do is very engaging. And so I wanted to engage you. I just didn't know until recently that I wasn't going to be able to hear from you through audio and video, but we can see if we can do any of it in the chat. Okay, you should always know who's talking to you, right? Whenever you walk into a classroom, you introduce yourself and you have your bio and everybody knows who you are. And that's important here. I teach 300 level undergraduate classes and graduate classes, but they are asynchronous. So I don't teach hybrid classes. I don't teach synchronous courses. They are all asynchronous. Now, the other important part about that is that some of my classes are directly associated with Rutgers University developed and required use contemporary challenges, diversity, learning goals. And here is the one that I don't know if any of you are teaching using any diversity learning goals. And let me take a look at that for a moment. I'm going to move it. Hold on. And see how many actually work with learning goals. So about 26% don't use specific learning, diversity learning goals. 26% use specific ones. Okay. So recognize that the courses that some of the courses I teach have a specific learning goal that I am required to teach to. How I teach. I have a social justice orientation. So this isn't a business orientation, but it is about, for me, the employee, because of course I work through the School of Management and Labor Relations, or the individual. It might be for some of your courses, but it is a social justice perspective. I offer student-centered learning. That means I give students an awful lot of choice. And I meet students where they are. So if they have a concern doing something in a particular way, we work it out so they do it in a different way. I provide students with what they need to have to succeed. And I make student engagement count. That's who I am. Now, I was kind of forced, not that it wasn't part of my pedagogical perspective, but I was really forced to make that engagement time count, because if you look at the bottom of that slide, this is what I'm finding in the last several years in teaching the asynchronous courses. And those, I get 3 hours. Now, when you're in a face-to-face classroom, you've got 3 hours and you're hoping, crossing your fingers. I want you to see me say this. Hi. When you're in the classroom, you have that 3 hour block, and then you're hoping that they go back to wherever they are and work on whatever for at least 2 hours in between. So you're looking at hopefully 5 hours. I have been teaching, which I don't know if you've seen my bio, but I've been teaching online for 21 years. I helped Rutgers come into the online learning. I was one of the first instructors ever at Rutgers University that taught 100% online. So I've got a lot of data to understand who these students are, and things have changed. And this is what I get. I get 3 hours. So we have to make that time count. All right. So now you know who I am, my perspective. Now let's look at part one. If you have a particular DEI focus, that is learning goals, and a course that has, let's say, diversity or equity or inclusion in the topic or in the major objectives of the course, I'm going to talk about that in a moment. But this is for that group of individuals who doesn't teach that subject matter all the time, or has courses that they may want to add into those courses some activities that focus on DEI. And let me give you some examples of what I do. Here's the first one. Now, this course is Oh, I see what I can do. Hold on. There you go. I truly tech person, my dear friend. Can people see me and see the slide now too? Oh, the slides aren't up. Okay, but I'm sharing. We'll share my screen. Oh, they are now. We're good? Okay, I have to keep this here, I see. Can I hit full screen? Everybody hold on. This is what happens. We're all cool with it by now, I'm sure. Okay, you set it up, and I can talk because I can do that well. All right. So we've got two different types of courses. One of the courses, and think about this from your perspective, from the courses you teach. Now, I see some of you don't teach courses, so imagine with me or join me in the courses that I teach here. One of them is called Professional Development Strategies. It has absolutely no learning goals associated with diversity, equity, and inclusion. However, it's important when we're looking at training individuals on how to operate in the workplace and how to set goals and how to interact with others, that there is some information in there about DEI. So that's one course. And I'm going to show you some examples as soon as he gets my screen going. Then there's another course. And let me just, hold on just a second. And the other course, here we go. Rock and roll. Okay. We're good? Okay. Okay, now do you forward or do I? Okay, you need to forward for a while here. So we get to, please excuse me, participants, we need to get to, all right, next one. Okay, so professional development skills, strategies. So you see, I work with teams, effective work performance, interact with and influence others. Those are my learning goals. Doesn't say anything about DEI. Next slide. Here's what I do. Next slide. There we go. So the first week that we walk into this course, I have a little bit of an introduction. Obviously, this is asynchronous. I've taped it. I do a lot of taping. My students know exactly what I look like. I talk to them just like I'm talking to you right now, every single week. And I say, you know, you're going to learn a lot in this course. And here are some basic issues about what's going on in the workforce today. You might be working part-time. You might be a returning student. I have a lot of individuals who are 28, 32, 39 who are returning to the workplace, and many veterans I teach as well. And say, well, whatever your work experience is, we're going to pull it all together today, and we're going to look at what's going on in the workforce today. And every semester, this changes. But obviously last semester and this semester, I began to add DEI information. So trends and issues, I go out, I find some of the resources that talk about the work or whatever your subject matter would be, whether it's sociology or geology or whatever, and diversity, inclusion, and equity. So that's how I pull it in. And next slide. After I give them this list for them to look at for the week, and here's, you can't see that very well, I apologize, but there's a lot of links to articles that make this connection. Next slide. So you got to read 2 of them. Help others understand how this is connected to whatever subject matter you have and DEI. So here's some suggestions from my course: most impacting aspects on employment or the nature of work. So tie these 2 things together. COVID-19, the racial reckoning. What does that have to do with the workplace? Being able to see both of these subjects at the same time, along with what's happening in the workplace. So a good discussion in the beginning with the information that you've collected. They don't know what they're looking for. You take the time and make a short list. Here are some things I want you to read. Pick 2 and let's talk about them. Okay, another course. Next slide. Emotional intelligence in the workplace. Here's another course that has absolutely nothing to do with DEI. So you can see here we're dealing with all the different theories having to do with emotional intelligence, understanding how this relates to work, how this relates to effective work performance. Those are my basic learning goals for this course. Next slide. So here's what I do. There is a writing assignment where everyone has to pick one topic right in the beginning of the semester. They say, this is what I want to research and write about this semester. Along with everything else that we're going to do, I'm also going to, on the side, research this. And I've added diversity, inclusion, and equity, and emotional and social intelligence. So they have to connect the two. They sign up in a Google form. Next slide. And then later on, they have a discussion about that. But now I'm going to talk to you about the graduate course. I teach this on the graduate level. In the graduate level, they have a whole week on diversity, equity, and inclusion in connection with emotional intelligence. And they have a discussion. Now, what I do with my graduate students is I always have graduate leaders. So someone has signed up in the beginning of the semester who has a particular focus on this, and they help lead this discussion online. It's not just me. So I have students that are interested in this topic, whatever that topic may be. This week it's on DEI, who will help me lead these discussions. Okay, next slide. You can't see this. So these are just some of the questions that associate gender and age with emotional intelligence and physical and mental abilities with emotional intelligence. Next slide. Now let's look at if you're already working in a DEI level course, topical course. Next slide. I use polls. Boy, there's a news flash. I use polls all the time. And I use them very effectively because I use them as a teaching tool. So I draw students in to get them started thinking about the topics that I know we're going to discuss in the first 6 weeks of the course, and then I give another poll for the second 6 weeks in the course. So we orient the students to the content, motivate students to think about the topics, the concepts, and it's 10 or 15 questions. So I really get a sense of what they're interested in. So this one, let's say, now we're definitely, I'll talk about this in a moment, but we're definitely going to talk about some of the American myths, whether it's meritocracy or colorblind ideal or the melting pot myth. So I start out with questions, and this one, I don't see color between people. For example, I don't see the difference in color, race. I don't see gender differences. I don't see differences in age. And I have them answer that. So I know when I get to that point who I'm working with. Next slide. But there's another reason. And when you look at this, you see my cute little face in there. Okay, that's my video that I embed in this. So when they get to the week where I want to talk about whatever that I've polled them on, they're going to get me chatting it up, talking about the statistics. So students get to recognize some of the more complex issues in society and in the workplace. And for you, of course, it would be whatever connection you make to your subject matter. So I understand that where the class is coming from, and we get to look at some of the complexities. Go to the next slide. So here's a good example. If you work in DEI, you know exactly where I'm coming from right now. So I asked them in one of the questions, businesses should enjoy the same First Amendment religious freedoms that are provided to individual U.S. citizens. And you can see 55% of them went, yes, I think that's a great idea. I'm all for that. Then we've got 27 that say it's a little complicated, but only 18% that say, no, I don't think that they should do that. Next slide. Then I ask them, well, should organizations have the right in their healthcare plans that they offer to limit certain birth control because they have religious beliefs that are being impacted if they offer these particular birth control methods. And of course, you know what happens. So now that dives to 9%. So next slide. I'll bring it up. So wait. You 55 of you can't say absolutely that's what should happen in businesses. And then 82% of you, when asked this question, say no, they can't have the right to do that. So we're able to bring some of those more complexities in through the polls. Next. Team projects. I'm big on team projects. The world is about teams. As you know, of all the things that you've been doing while we've all been sitting at home working so hard, you know you've been working on teams and this and that. Well, that's how the world is. And I teach my students to do a lot of teamwork. This one is both on the graduate and undergraduate level. This is both diversity and inclusion on the undergraduate and the inclusive workplace on the graduate level. They get in teams. It's standardized. So everybody's doing the same thing. They just have different dimensions of diversity that they're working with. So they have to also develop the discussion questions so that when we, at the end of the semester, are discussing these course projects that they've worked on for 9 weeks. Well, I'm not going to be the one that's asking the questions. They are. They're the ones that focused on this for most of their semester. Okay. Also, I grade 70% of the graduate students, but since everyone has gone through the exact same experience and knows what the assignment is all about, then I choose one graduate student, actually 3 graduate students evaluate a team project. So 30% of a team's final grade comes from their peers because we've all done the exact same thing. Next. There's difference. The undergraduate focuses more on those general, what's going on in today's, what are the social justice issues? What are the legal protections? What's going on in today's workplace? And then something that's the same. What is an interesting topic? So it's a little project within the course project that the team gets to say, yeah, I'm really jazzed about this topic, and I think we should pull this out and have a special section on that. And then, of course, discussion questions. Now, on the right-hand side, you've got the graduate level course. And you can see that goes much more into organizational policies, programs, culture, the things that you would think would be have a focus in a graduate level course. And of course, they have to have discussion questions and they have that special interest topic. Now you'd say, does that really work? Do they really get into it? Next slide. This is the undergraduate, because I didn't want to give you too many examples. So here are 3. Their special interest topic was transgender in the military. The second one, pronouns and acceptance in the workplace. And the third, this is all on gender identity and team projects. The third one is the hostile work environment for LGBTQ community. So those are pretty good special interest topics. And then the discussion questions, they're golden. I am just always so pleased with they have to come up with 2 to 4 discussion questions. And then I pick from that and say, these are the ones that are the best. Next slide. I ask both the undergraduate and graduates to make a deep personal connection so that they do a portfolio assignment that has many different moving parts. And every week that we deal with content, they are doing something to understand that content. For example, and this one is an interesting, if we were talking in person, maybe we'd get into a good discussion about it, but I still require students to take IATs. And that is a test if you're not engaged in DEI focused studies, this is a test where students get to see what their implicit biases are from a range of different topics, and that this entire test is on the Harvard, on a Harvard server, and so it's free to students. That's just one experience. Every week they do a different experience. Next slide. And here's two more. One of them is that they do some personal reflections on differences and the impact of those differences on individuals' well-being. And then they also have to offer their own diversity story. Now, this doesn't go on without all of the course content, that all of the concepts that need to be taught in a DEI course. Obviously, those things are offered by the content, what they're reading, what they're hearing me say in my videos, but then they have to make that personal connection. Next slide. This is just an example. I recognize you can't read this. The first bullet is, I need to know, do you know what you're talking about? What is the concept? Let's take intersectionality. Tell me about intersectionality. Now, I want you to talk about how that's impacted your life or are part of your family or the life of family or friends. Next. Just an aside, I use a template for absolutely everything. So that when students send this in, we use Canvas. And so when students upload their work, then when I'm grading it, I know exactly where they are for more involved and multi-section assignments. Just a commercial. Next. Okay, so the diversity story. It starts the day they were born, it ends this year, and it has 6 different major concepts that we've been working with throughout the entire semester. So when they tell their story, it helps me understand, did you really get this, and can you make personal meaning out of it? Next slide. LaDonna. This is a listening, writing, and discussion. They have to listen to this NPR piece. If you are working with DEI in your courses and you've never heard LaDonna, one day I was standing chopping vegetables on a Saturday listening to NPR, and this came on. I guess it was about 2 years ago. It's from This American Life, if you listen to NPR, and it stopped me in my tracks. I put my knife down, sat on my rug on the floor, and listened to the whole thing, and I said, this is going in my course. It is everyone's favorite activity in the undergraduate course. So they have to listen, they have to write about it, and then everybody shares their writing and they talk about it. Next. These are just some of the specifics to the assignment. I'm going to skip this because of time. If you're interested in the LaDonna exercise, you can either get my slide set or I'd be happy to talk to you. Okay, and same with this, that they do discuss the case. All right, so now we get to part 2. What are the opportunities here? I'm going to give a couple of positive opportunities, and then I'm also going to give some of the challenges. Next slide. If you remember, I told you that in my DEI classes, everyone in all the different classes does a self-identity chart. So they all do this. Next, so I can show what the chart looks like. So they have to say, is this a valuable perspective that I bring to the rest of the world? Is this important to who I am? Everyone has to complete this. I will say with sexual orientation and gender identity, students have a choice whether they want to answer or not. Next. So why does this matter? Because they share it. They have to share it and discuss it. And they have to connect what they're reading with about identity, about diversity and self-identity, and what they just read, because they read about 10 other students' learning communities papers. So here's an example. It says, it seems like the people who were part of the dominant culture groups were more likely to say that their race, gender, or religion was not that important to them as the people who are in the non-dominant culture groups. Bingo! There's one of the reasons why I have the entire class do this. They can read about this. They just did. That's in the blue, in the complexity of identity. So, somebody's written in a book all about this. But to actually look at their entire learning community and go, oh, this white male, oh, I see, this isn't important to them. Oh, this individual who is of a non-dominant religion, oh, that is important to them. They see it because they are that. They took it, the rest of the class took it, and it confirms the things that I'm speaking about. Next slide. So many of my white peers, again, including myself, do not see that our race as valuable to the workplace or important as general. And then someone else has connected it to the white privilege article that I have them read. Next. Okay, so there's 3 myths: meritocracy, colorblind ideal, and the melting pot myth. And this is the one that brings it all, and this is also shared, to a head. So everybody has to explain the concept, and then they have to say, what is it that I think about it? And then share it. Next slide. And this is what we get. I used to believe this, but I don't anymore. It says a repeating theme was that the colorblind ideal, their reflections on, remember, they're talking about their peers now. They're reading each other's work. Repeating theme was the colorblind ideal, their reflection about the topic, the downsides, the experiences, and then and they get it. So it's an opportunity for individuals that don't come from that perspective, and it can just as much as be about physical and mental abilities as it is about race, because there is no doubt it's been about race this year. But I've been teaching this for over 20 years. It's about many of the dimensions of diversity. So whether it's gender or age. Next slide. Okay. I make sure they know how to talk about it, with diversity with each other. It's very important. And if you are teaching at Rutgers, this book is free. And by the way, if you're having concerns, I didn't look right now, but if you're having concerns, you should read the book too, because this is a great book about how to have these conversations. And there's an actual process. Next slide. Here's another free book. So you can assign it. You don't have to have them buy the book, but you could even have them read 3 pages in a particular chapter. They get so many pages to download for free. Subtle Acts of Inclusion is another book that I use a lot on how do we understand microaggressions and how do we not make sure that we are not offering microaggressions to other people. Next slide. Okay, so what are the challenges? And here's the biggest part. Not everybody that walks into my classroom feels the same way. How I feel, the values I hold, the academic background that I come from, they don't. And I understood from a long time ago. About 2008, I read an article, which I have up on the next slide, but just hold on, don't change yet, that I need to be working with the students that have conflicting beliefs and values to the social justice issues that I'm talking. And believe me, this came to a head in 2016 when Donald Trump was running for president. This was a very interesting, the fall of when that election was in 2016 was big. But you don't want to shame them, silence them, but they may be resistant to course concepts, and they may just be innocent or ignorant to the facts and the complexities of what is really going on because of the information that they get at either home or their media. Next. This is the one I read. And I really do recommend, if you're teaching DEI, that you're going to take a look at an article like this that says we need to include everyone in our educational initiatives and make sure that we're not just shaming and blaming. Next. Well, this just shows that there is the propensity to criticize and exclude and put students on the defensive if they aren't from the perspective that the course obviously comes from. When you read the syllabus, it's obvious where my courses come from a social justice perspective. Next slide. So what do? I make sure that everyone understands that I am not grading their opinions. Everybody has their own opinions. I need to know, have you learned the course content? So you can have a differing opinion, but make sure that you know the concepts that I am communicating and the complexities of these. And then students can offer their very various perspectives on the sometimes volatile topics that I cover in my courses. Next slide. And I say this is my introduction video. So I tell them right up front, you can have whatever opinion you want. Here's how this works. Next slide. I offer these as suggestions. I know that you can't write them down right now. I hope that somehow you can access my PowerPoint. I'd be very happy to share it with you. These are 4 academic articles that I highly recommend. The one at the bottom, 2008, was the one that got me started to understand how to work with students who come from different perspectives than the focus of my course objectives. The rest of these are on the philosophy of how to teach diversity, inclusion, and equity. Next. And here we are. So I only have about 7 minutes left, but if anyone has any type of question or any type of comment that they'd like to make, if you'd like to offer that up, we can talk about what you want to talk about. And let me see. Does anybody have anything that they would like to specifically they'd like me to specifically focus on in this? Yes. Is this asynchronous? Yes, it's 100% asynchronous. So everything, and that's a very good point, is just because it's asynchronous, a lot of students or a lot of faculty think that you set up this asynchronous course and it just sits there and doesn't move. My courses take on a life of their own because the subjects that I work with are so alive. They're happening every day in the news. They're impacting students. They're impacting people's families. So I can add anything I want to and regularly do. 1, by using the polls, but 2, by just popping in a different video that I'm talking to them, just like I'm talking to you, a little bit less rushed. But, one of my favorite colleagues was talking about, you're always touching your asynchronous course. And I said, of course I am, because things change so much. And she said, well, I really don't get that. I said, that's because you teach about dead people. There's people, when you teach a history course, there's not much going to go on. These people are past. What I'm dealing with is happening right now, whether organizations are making a further commitment to DEI or that they're put to task on it. I can bring that information right into the classroom and talk to them. Did you read what happened this week? Watch this news clip. It has to do with what we're going to talk about this week. So even though it's asynchronous, my courses are very much alive.
Hi, we can read some of the live Q&A questions now.
Yes.
So there's one question that asks, are there university level learning goals related to DEI? I'm a new staff member and I'm still learning about these kinds of things.
Yes, there are. And they have to do with SAS, the School of Arts and Sciences. So if you are teaching a course that the students in the School of Arts and Sciences are taking, they have to take 2 diversity-related courses. And yes, you can look them up.
Yeah, and then another question, how has DEI evolved over the last 20 years? How are you keeping pace of course content with the evolving trend?
I only have 3 minutes for that. How I Oh, well, first of all, I'm on every listserv. So I spend about 40 minutes each night, unless it's a big day. Let's say it's a Supreme Court day. I'm going to read between 30 and 40 minutes every day what's going on in the United States, having to do with the workforce, diversity, inclusion, and equity. That's how I keep up with it. And I I take seminars, I read a lot, and I have quite a library, although I get them now online. Whatever books that I see are being reviewed in my journals, I read them. How has it changed over the last 20 years? One of the biggest things is that students who are from non-dominant culture identities have found their voice over the last 20 years. And the people who have come into my courses that are innocent or ignorant to the understanding of the concepts I'm teaching are finally able to find some humility and come to their peers when they're in those discussions and say, I don't get the meritocracy thing. I see that you clip this, that you don't believe that it should be part of an organization. I don't get that. And then they can have those discussions. Those are the 2 things having to do with students that have changed over the last 20 years. Many other things academically have changed. The whole theories have changed. Whole words belonging just came in a year ago. We've got a whole new term. That wasn't even a thing 3 years ago. Look anywhere to find the word belonging. So first it was diversity, then they added inclusion. Now it's belonging. Of course, equity and equality were always there from my social justice perspective.
We do have 1 minute, but I don't even know if we could answer one more question. But to what extent do you address political rhetoric? For example, during the Trump presidency, Asian American identity was framed in the pejorative. Is this an issue you would raise with your students?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We do news and views. I have a whole week that they say, okay, everybody go out and find something that has to do with either your identity or how work is, how it's associated in any way to work. And then that's the week I bring in the political. I have a whole tape and talking about politics and DEI. And that's one of the ways that I get to show exactly the perspective. I have 56 seconds. I'm so sorry that I can't answer any other questions, but absolutely everything's on the table in my courses. I have to be able to talk about all of these issues, and I have to teach my students how to talk about them as well, because that's real life out there. That's what's going on. So it's going to happen in my courses if they're going to be able to have a voice outside in the real world. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. This has been so great.
All right. Take care. Have a great rest of the conference.